I can pause it.
It's only a land-based vote, so you have to own land in order to vote. So that excludes like farmers who are renting the land and folks who are renting houses. So I guess we have some doubts about whether irrigation districts would actually be more representative than local agencies. But it's something to think about, and I'll be thinking about it more. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
That's great.
Danielle, just want to jump in quickly for this group 4. Joseph messaged me privately to ask that 4 members of their group are unmuted. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now for this group.
As you're doing that, just want to remind everybody that we want to keep these to 2 minutes max. It's 5:29. We can cut into our break time a little bit and make the break between the session and happy hour 10 minutes instead of 15, but try to keep your report backs concise.
So I think we'll do that because actually we're going to maybe not follow the flow quite as much. I asked each of the members of the group to report back the one thing that really stood out for them that they really think is important as it relates to the conversation of what's the way to build a bridge and move forward between Enviro and EJ interests. And so I'd like just to work our way around the group and invite you all to share the point that you wanted to make and you took away. So Mary Elizabeth. Are you there? How about you, Nat?
Increased communication, Mary Elizabeth.
Thank you. Say a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more. Between who and where and how?
Well, we wanted some more communication between the disadvantaged communities and the environmental communities so that we can join forces together on more issues than just the tunnel. And I talked about the AB 617 process that Stockton is going through that has a lot of environmental justice and environmental communities that are working together on this project. And I hope that it will continue to build bridges that can extend into our future water.
Thanks, Nat.
2 related things. One is access to data, because neither Enviro nor EJ interests can make good decisions in the dark. And the other is representation of EJ communities that are directly affected by groundwater issues, both at the GSA level and also at gatherings like this.
Beautiful. Lisa.
One thing I think it's really important for both the EJ and the environmental communities to address is the economics of groundwater management. And recently there have been a lot of messages put out by AG, for example, that Sigma is going to have a really negative impact on low-income communities in the Central Valley. And I would really like to see a more balanced analysis done. Because there were a lot of problems with the analysis that the AG community commissioned, and I think it's important to do a balanced analysis, and also if there are going to be negative effects on the low-income communities, to figure out how to address that in a way that works for everyone.
Thank you. And Pablo Ortiz.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah. The last thing that we talk about is how climate change can be a point to join us all together, because it's something that it's affecting us all. It's going to affect both groups, and not only both groups, but also agriculture and basically everyone. So that's something that we need to keep in mind a lot. And an example is what is happening right now with the virus COVID-19, right? Like last week, this letter that came from many different environmental groups and social justice groups, and even some individuals from universities related to put a moratorium on water shutoff in California, right? So in a longer run, climate change is going to be something that will probably do something similar in getting all these groups together.
Beautiful. Bottom line, our group really felt like there was all those issues were common ground issues, places where we can make progress together. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. And thank you, all of you, for reporting back collectively and staying so quick. Can we hear from group 5, Nell, or your designated reporter?
Yes, we designated Darcy. She was a fabulous note taker and agreed to do the report back.
Yes. Hello, everyone, once again. Okay, so very quickly, we talked about a lot of things, so I'm just going to summarize kind of the main points. The EJ priority was that the GSPs really show an understanding and incorporation of the water quality and quantity challenges that disadvantaged communities face. And then the environmental priority was kind of on a similar theme, but having the groundwater sustainability plans show an inclusion of groundwater dependent ecosystems and interconnected surface waters in their planning and management. One mutually beneficial connection was climate change. Climate change was mentioned, as well as sort of a shared history of land use and water management practices that have led us to this sort of detrimental point that we all find ourselves in, that impact both EJ and environmental communities. And then in addition, kind of the flip side of that is that, water quality and water levels are inextricably linked. And when, one is improved, or when both are improved, it really benefits everyone. And in addition, so the concept of multiple benefits was brought up a number of times. So land fallowing, for example, can provide a lot of multiple benefits that support both groups. And then one unintended consequence that we identified was perhaps when agriculture like alfalfa fields are used to improve habitat for wildlife or recharge projects are implemented, it can really degrade the water quality. And so that can be something that we should all be looking out for. And then ideas for collaboration are, again, multi-benefit projects. Amanda mentioned the KWIA RCIS program that's fallowing land in an environmentally friendly way. And then continuing to include environmental justice priorities environmental justice priorities in environment negotiations and vice versa. So I think there was this sort of sentiment mentioned where people are really having a hard time finding, an EJ voice or an environmental group to sort of join discussion because time is limited. We're all focused on what we're doing. And so I think really what came out of that was something that the Groundwater Collaborative could support, which is preparation of information and educational materials that clearly show the connections between the two groups and also small farmers, so that people can understand the benefits of bridging groups. And in addition, I think we ended on really finding a way to have a consistent, clear theme that both environmental and EJ groups can, get behind and show that we are all speaking with one voice, and then also include the economic argument in all of this. So, yeah.
Thank you, Darcy. And thank you, Nell's group 5. Let's move on to Mike's group 6.
Yes, thank you. That was interesting to hear all of these report outs and see where there's overlap. And I definitely heard some with what Darcy just said and the groups that I was lucky enough to facilitate. Just running quickly through what we wanted to hit on, the EJ priority we identified was just ensuring that there's groundwater for disadvantaged communities and for rural communities. The environmental priority, we also talked about depletion of interconnected surface water, and I think just landed on just GSAs identifying GDEs and their plans being a pretty basic thing that's really important. In terms of mutually beneficial connections and multiple benefits, it sounds simple, but just the recognition that groundwater levels going too low is bad for all of the things that we care about, both water quality and GDE. So that was kind of one that we focused on. And then we also talked about just having a shared interest in being in the room in these discussions, in which we had a hard time landing on an unintended consequence, but I think I could flip that into a missed opportunity to strengthen our cause and our messaging if we don't join forces on that. And then ideas for collaboration, we talked about both what we could do at a basin scale and within the collaborative itself. And one was around messaging and having shared talking points so that as we're meeting with stakeholders, we understand what different groups are saying and can help reinforce messaging. And then we also talked about deepening relationships, and as you have bonds with people and know them, that you can get report outs of what's happening in meetings that you might not be able to be in. And those are both areas we thought that the collaborative could continue to help with and reinforce.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. Great job. And last but certainly not least, number 7, Alessandra.
Yes, thank you all for sticking around here today to hear our report out. The wonderful Daniel Mountjoy volunteered to both take notes and report out, so I will turn it over to him.
All right, a lot of overlap here. On the environmental justice side, certainly the focus on addressing drinking water needs, both quantity and quality, but really through increased engagement of communities is just a key sort of process issue. And the absence or the need for increased funding for translation services, not just Spanish, but multiple languages in the Central Valley. And not just for the GSP development, but for ongoing engagement. Language is still a barrier for full engagement. On the environmental priority side, looking at long-term availability of groundwater for all benefits, all beneficial uses. And really when thinking about that, it's really implicit is ensuring consideration of all stakeholders, all those that benefit from water use. And specific examples of stream flow came up, but also translation popped up. And the issue of water quality planning is a common area that currently is not very well coordinated under SGMA law and tends to be shuffled off onto other regulations of the Water Board and CV salts and others. And that's another common ground area. In terms of other mutually beneficial connections, both groups felt the engagement of stakeholders not being heard was an issue, and that we could work better together around common concerns for water, that both groups felt that it was not their needs were not fully being heard. On the unintended consequence side, we interpreted it as really what's an unintended consequence of the SGMA process, which was the influential role that consultants are playing, and the fact that they are not necessarily listening to all the needs in the area, and it varies by consultant, and therefore are not encouraging wider engagement if they don't think it was a priority under the requirements of their contracts or their definitions of SGMA GSP development. So that was an interesting one. And then for collaboration, I've heard it before with some other groups, consistent messaging and commenting between the two groups on insufficient water quality planning in GSPs, that we both share that concern of water quality not being addressed. And also the recognition that groundwater depletion can impact groundwater dependent ecosystems before the community wells are affected. So it's really an early indicator that we should all care about. Also the idea that we can better write grants when we're working together because there's different funding pools that each entity can access, and that also demonstrate collaborative effort in those grant applications. And then finally, a really simple starting point for collaboration is working together to provide public education for the community. Rather than having it just be about environmental justice or just about environmental issues, come together to provide that input to the community. That's it. Thanks for sticking around.
Great job, Daniel. Thank you. And I agree with a lot of those recommendations, and some of them were actually already, I know some of you are already putting some of those practices into action. I'm going to have the pleasure of combing through all of your notes either tonight after happy hour or tomorrow morning to summarize this for our participants that join us tomorrow that weren't able to be here today, and to summarize our next steps. So I look forward to digging through all your notes. I'm trying to advance the slide. There we go. Let's take a quick break. So